Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Pro and HD video blog for Monday, the 6th of July, 2015. Taking a look at the first 10 days of July, this first third of the month. Where are the points of origin that we've seen over the past 100 plus years? Well, we do have a few of them out here in the deep tropics, scattering of developments in the subtropics off the southeast coast. More concentrated in the Gulf of Mexico, kind of three random spots in the Caribbean, but then notice that the Southeast Pacific is really the place to be for development this first 10 days of July. Typically this time of year, we have a very strong area of high pressure sitting out over the Atlantic, and that typically reduces the numbers of tropical storms and hurricanes that develop. You have very strong trade winds that are blowing across this region, screaming across the Caribbean. Typically pressures are high out across this region, and you just don't have that much development over time. And you can see that here as this map goes back more than 100 years, each of these red dots representing the origin point, or the development start time, if you will, of tropical storms and hurricanes. Just not that many this time of year. Now if we look at the latest satellite image of the Atlantic Basin, it matches up very nicely. You can see just by looking at this satellite image, there's very strong evidence of stable air sitting out here, dry, dusty air coming across the deep tropics. And then in the upper levels of the atmosphere, there is strong upper-level wind flow coming from the Pacific, typical of an El Nino year. No convection in the Caribbean, none in the Gulf of Mexico, and a weak little surface trough off the southeast coast. That'll keep things very quiet over the next probably week to 10 days in the Atlantic Basin. Now the Western Pacific is a different story entirely. The Madden-Julian Oscillation, or the MJO, has gone very wild here in the Western Pacific. And all this means, simplifying it for you, is this is a period of fertility in the tropics, of upward motion that promotes convective activity. And as we go around our satellite tour here, starting first in the Atlantic Basin, again, the Intertropical Convergence Zone, very suppressed, very quiet, and no convective activity in the Atlantic Basin. Conversely, as we start to move around, heading to the west here, on this full disk shot as we call it, you see a lot more convective activity showing up in the Pacific. This is area 96E in the Pacific that could develop into a tropical storm or hurricane and head in the general direction of Hawaii over the next several days, so you definitely want to monitor that. But it is the Western Pacific where we have the strongest upward motion going on right now, way up high in the atmosphere. Winds very light, a large area of light winds at the 200 millibar level, or about 40,000 feet up, and that allows the air to rise vertically and spread out very evenly instead of being blown off in one direction. And as such, you have these typhoons. You have three of them lined up here. I'm not even going to try to pronounce their names. This is the Philippines here, one of them exiting the northern tip of the Philippines. This one is going to be very large and very powerful, and probably going to threaten the areas near Taiwan, Okinawa, and then eventually mainland China, and then a third typhoon sitting off to the south and east of that, in this big train of tropical activity in the Pacific. Now for the Atlantic Basin, we really don't see anything happening. Let me go back to this. The MJO forecast to kind of crash back into what we call the null region here, or very little upward motion favorable anywhere around the globe over the next couple of weeks. Maybe, as you can see the outline of the ensemble members here, this sort of shadow, maybe indicating a slight amplification of the Madden-Julian Oscillation in the regions that favor the Atlantic Basin once we get towards the 20th and beyond, but that's still a couple of weeks out. For the next several days, nothing going on in the Atlantic, Caribbean, or Gulf of Mexico. All the attention will be placed on the Pacific, where those typhoons will be roaming and approaching land in the next few days, and that's probably going to be a pretty big news story. And don't forget, you can track those in Hurricane Pro and HD right there at your fingertips. Keep a watch on anything around the globe. One of the wonderful benefits. Well, that is it from me for today. Not much else going on to talk about, which is, again, very typical for this time of July, so no real surprises there. Maybe a little bit less active than we normally would see overall because of the El Nino and the suppressed Atlantic activity right now. But again, we'll see what happens after about the 20th, when we might get a little bit of a favorable window opportunity in the Atlantic Basin. Until then, nothing to worry about. Have a great rest of your week. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com and for Hurricane Pro and HD. I'll talk to you again next Monday.